Gurmag Angler was once a common threat in Modern, used to delve away all the interactive spells your Death Shadow opponent used to disrupt you, leaving them with a 5/5 and leaving you with nothing. Once Wizards released more and more insane removal spells beyond Path to Exile, Shadow players were forced to say goodbye to Gurmag as it just couldn't compete with new threats like Kroxa and the interaction the opponent was casting. Some say the downfall of Gurmag and the upside of efficient removal is making Modern lose the spark it once had in the past. I was browsing the Pauper metagame when I found Gurmag Angler being a key threat in a tier 1 deck. This was Dimir Control. This deck is centered around milling yourself with Thought Scour and Mental Note, fueling up the graveyard either to delve it away or to put instants and sorceries in there for Tolarian Terror. Not only that, but it's playing busted cards like Brainstorm, and it doesn't need fetch lands as you can just mill the 2 cards off the top of the deck that you put back. You also get to play classic blue cards like Counterspell and Deep Analysis alongside powerful black removal spells like Snuff Out. This deck is very explosive and overall I get a good record, so you want to watch till the end of the video. Round 1 starts being on the play and we have to mulligan a clunky 7, but we find a very nice 6 with 2 cantrips and interactive spell as well as a Gurmag. This hand is perfect because we can aggro out this Gurmag as soon as turn 3 if you'd like. Starting off the game, I lead with Basic Island instead of our tap land, specifically because of Spell Pierce. This is because in the Pauper format there's a lot of 1-drop non-creature spells that we would like to counterspell, and if they don't cast one, we can cast a cantrip. The opponent leads with an Elvish Mystic, and we just cast a cantrip on their end step. We find a Tolarian Terror as well as a Chainer's Edict, which we can't cast, so I lead with my tap land and say go. Now you could Thought Scour yourself to try and find a Snuff Out, but because my opponent is most likely on Elves, they play a ton of non-creature draw spells in the format, which typically draw 4 to 5 cards because they play so few lands. Back on their turn, they cast a load of little Elves as well as an Elvish Vanguard, which presents a big problem because Chainer's Edict is not good against a big board because they'll just sacrifice their worst creature, as well as a 5/5 isn't particularly good against Elvish Vanguard because the Elvish Vanguard can definitely get bigger than a 5/5. In our graveyard, we have 5 instants and sorceries, so what I can do here is consider and have Tolarian Terror as an option. I'm hoping to find an untapped Basic Island or just a land in general, and we do, so we play the land, play the Tolarian Terror, and hope that it can hold down the fort for a little bit of time. Elvish Vanguard is very powerful. In 1 turn already, they can turn it into a 5/5, which means that next turn is most likely going to be attacking through my Tolarian Terror. This is making things very awkward, and we need to find something like a Snuff Out or a Cast Down so that we can remove it from the board. Top taking a Thought Scour, my logic is this: I'm not going to win this game if I just play a 5/5 and pass back the turn because eventually they're just going to start attacking with a load of 1/1s and 2 big blockers aren't going to suppress the damage. So instead, I decide to attack in for 5, they don't block it at all, I play another Gurmag Angler and we can now hold up Counterspell for any premium Elves that can pump their team. The opponent casts another Elvish Vanguard. Now, many people would snap off Counterspell here, but I think that's a mistake. Look at how many cards they have in hand, they're running out of Elves to cast. I'm just going to try and hold this Counterspell so that I can either Counterspell a draw spell or a much bigger Elf. This Elvish Vanguard is going to be much smaller. The opponent makes 4 mana and then casts an Alana Huntmaster, and as this is 4 mana and they're not going to cast anything else this turn, I decide to use the Counterspell. The opponent then attacks in for 6, and we draw a Counterspell. To start the turn, I Thought Scour myself, we find another Spell Pierce, and I decide not to attack. This attack I'm not too sure about. I know they have a lot of power on the board, but with Counterspell backup, and them being at 15, maybe it was a smart idea to attack here. Let me know in the comment section down below, but the opponent casts a non-creature draw spell, and because we have double Spell Pierce, we actually can pierce it. I wasn't feeling too good about this board until we rip Snuff Out off the top of the deck. This means now that I can Snuff Out the 6/6, attack in for 10, and I have to hold up Counterspell for any Elf, because if not, the Elvish Vanguard will grow big enough to kill us. They cast a Ranger, we cast a Counterspell, and they attack in for 5. Things aren't looking too great until we rip a Cast Down off the top of the deck. This is perfect because now we can say go and use Cast Down as a really good combat trick. All we are hoping is that they don't top deck a green spell so that they can untap their Nettle Sentinels. They find an Elf, they're gonna bash in with everything, and we get to block 2 things, kill the Elvish Vanguard, and we survive at 1 life. This means that we can now attack for lethal next turn as they only have 1 blocker. What a game. We top deck a land, that doesn't matter, let's bash in. Oh, right, that Elf has text. Well, it didn't matter that we attacked, we are still dead on board, but yeah, that sucks. Going into boarding, we want the Suffocated Fumes in, as well as the Unexpected Fangs, and Spell Pierce and Deep Analysis are quite weak against them. This matchup does go quite long, so quickly summarizing game 2, I had to mulligan a clunky 7 but keep a very nice 6, and we overpowered the opponent by just casting a load of removal spells, including Suffocating Fumes, as it just wipes the board very efficiently. We ended up winning game 2 by top decking a Snuff Out with 10 power on the board and the opponent being at 10 life. However, in game 3, Suffocating Fumes and Chainer's Edict just wasn't enough because the opponent kept refilling their hand very quickly with all the cantrips in their deck, and we just couldn't compete from our draws. Overall, I felt like this matchup is favored for Elves because they have a load of ways to refill their hand even though you have sweepers in the deck, and I think that you need to have a lot more removal to make it a consistent matchup. Going into the next round, on the play we have double Thought Scour, double land with a Tolarian Terror. So what we're going to do is lead with our tap land, then we're going to double Thought Scour, holding up Counterspell if they cast a relevant spell, and then hopefully on turn 3 we're going to slam this Tolarian Terror. The opponent leads with a tap land, ships it back, so we're just going to play our island, hold up double Thought Scour, Counterspell, looking to double Scour here so we can Tolarian Terror next turn. They only catch a Sacred Cat, so let's double Scour and slam the Terror. We're in a really good spot here because not only do we have a Terror on the board now, we also have Spell Pierce up to interact with the opponent. The opponent is playing a deck that focuses on Basilisk Gate. This is a deck that plays a load of gates and then pumps their crappy Sacred Cats and Squadron Hawks to make them very big, and also uses the Modern Age to get card advantage with all of their flashback spells. On their turn, they cycle an Ash Barrens, get a basic island, play the basic island, cast the Modern Age, and we have the Spell Pierce like a champion. They pass back the turn, and on our turn, we lead with the Brainstorm. This finds us a Consider and a Tolarian Terror. Now what we can do here is put Deep Analysis on top of our deck so that we can use the Surveil from Consider and put it into our graveyard so we can flash it back for value on later turns. Then we attack in for 5, they chump block, we play another Tolarian Terror, and ship it back. With cantrips, counterspells, removal spells, and a big board presence, the opponent finds it hard to compete with what we have available. They do cast things like Journey to Nowhere, we counterspell it, they make chump blockers with Sacred Cat, but that isn't enough to overpower the Ward 2 from our Tolarian Terrors and the big bodies, so we move on to game 2. Going into boarding, we want the mass removal spells in, the Graveyard Hate, and we want to take out all the 1-for-1 removal as they have a lot of value from Squadron Hawk as well as Embalm. In this matchup, there are tons of cantrips being cast, so at the start of game 2, nothing really happens until up to turn 5 when the opponent taps out after casting a lot of Brainstorms and Preordains. We draw a land, so what I decide to do is start the turn off with Augur of Bolas because if we hit a counterspell, we're going to hold that up for the rest of the game. And what do you know? We hit the counterspell. So let's play our land, say go, and make life very difficult for the opponent. Now we sideboarded very well because we have Suffocating Fumes here on the far left hand side of our hand, and what does the opponent do? They play 2 1/1s. Perfect for us, we can Suffocating Fumes, wipe the board, and bash in. While you see my opponent struggle here to compete with my board presence and cards in hand, I just want to shout out Mana Traders for sponsoring me. Please make sure to use their promo code on screen now if you want to use their rental service to get into Magic Online. Now, while this game looks pretty trivial, oh Harry, just bash him with your 5/5s every turn, you're obviously going to win this game, they're just going to chump, and then eventually die. Look at their side of the board. They have the Basilisk Gate. Now, you can only activate it as a sorcery, so you can't use it to make your creatures big to block, but what you can do is make your creatures big to attack. The point is, they're going to start pumping their Sacred Cats to eventually kill me. So I either need to find another Suffocating Fumes or just a load of 5/5s to the point where I can out-damage the life that they'll gain with the cats. Now this is what I thought they were going to do, but I think what eventually happened is that they were either mana screwed or they wanted to go for a different line that didn't play around Counterspell. I think they probably should have tried to use Basilisk Gate here, but instead they just tried to use removal spells, and it didn't work because I had a load of counters in hand. Going to the next round, we crushed an Ephemerate deck focused on casting things like Muldrifter, as well as having all the artifact lands so they can cast Thoughtcast and regenerate it and return it to their hand from the graveyard. But we just had a load of counterspells and 5/5s to slam, which really beat up on them. I found throughout this league that the only problem this deck has is that it is quite weak against decks that you need a lot of removal. And honestly, at times, I felt like 4 Suffocating Fumes in the 75 would be a good choice. In round 4, we played again against the same blue-white Modern Age deck. In game 2, they actually managed to pump a load of Sacred Cats to keep them alive, but at the end of the day, our counterspells and big bodies just outraced all the life that they were gaining. In round 5, we were 3-1, playing for the 4-1, and in game 3, in the mirror, we sadly lost because we got mana screwed. We cast many cantrips, it just didn't get there, and they had 2 Nihil spell bombs in the game to make sure our graveyard was empty to really stop the Gurmags and the Tolarian Terrors from coming down. Overall, I really enjoyed this deck, and it's one of my top picks for the Pauper format right now because I love milling myself, I love casting cantrips, I love casting counterspells, and the big bodies help you feel like an aggressive deck. As always, if you did enjoy this video, then please like and subscribe, and for you gambling degens, I'll make sure to open the chest at the end of this video. That's about it though. I'll catch you guys soon here back on the channel.